Would you buy products from a company that collaborated with the Nazis during World War II? What if that company paid reparations or started a foundation as a way to apologize for the mistakes of the past? Or what if the company refused to apologize or admit they did anything wrong? Would you still buy their products? We're about to look at several companies that had ties to the Nazi Party or profited by selling products to the Nazis during World War II. All of these companies are still around today, and we can almost guarantee you own one or more of their products. Let's find out which ones. If you've ever taken a picture using old-school film, you've probably bought a product from Kodak. For decades after World War II, Kodak kept a sinister secret from the public. They had been Nazi collaborators during the war. Kodak had subsidiaries in Germany and across Europe. Even as Germany's bold aspirations for world domination grew in the 1930s, Kodak kept healthy business relationships with the Nazi Party. After all-out war broke out and the United States joined the Allies, the US government mandated that companies could no longer do business with Axis nations. This was a problem for many companies operating internationally, Kodak being one of them. Kodak allowed their German branch to become more self-sufficient, and eventually the Nazis took control of it. However, Kodak took things one step further to make a profit. They began using their subsidiaries in neutral European countries, such as Switzerland, to continue doing business with Nazi Germany. The subsidiaries in Europe continued selling photographic equipment and electronics to the Nazis on behalf of Kodak. This meant that the Kodak Corporation was directly providing technology to the Nazis and making a profit off it, all while hiding these facts from the United States government. The heads of the Kodak company justified these actions by citing the massive profits they were bringing in. Worst of all, the German branch of Kodak used over 250 slave laborers from concentration camps. After the war, Kodak reclaimed their German subsidiary and collected the large profits made by the slave laborers during the war. Kodak ended up paying $500,000 into a fund which provided reparations to families of people who worked as slaves under the Nazi-controlled subsidiary, but the company never actually apologized. Volkswagen is clearly a German word, and it probably doesn't surprise you that the company had ties to the Nazi Party. However, what might surprise you is that the company was actually started by the Nazis. Adolf Hitler himself laid out the precursor to what would become Volkswagen. The idea for the company started with Hitler wanting to create a car for the common man, a people's car. And this is how Volkswagen got its name, Volks meaning people and Wagen meaning car. Hitler hired Ferdinand Porsche to develop the car. This initiative was where the classic Volkswagen Beetle got its shape. But the new head of the organization, which would eventually become Volkswagen, had bigger plans. Porsche insisted that the company also make military vehicles to support the Reich. The most influential of these vehicles was the Volkswagen Kübelwagen, which was a light military vehicle often seen in World War II movies, carrying around SS and Nazi officers. It had a boxy body and a tire mounted on the hood. During the time period that the Nazi parties controlled Germany, more than 15,000 slaves from concentration camps were used to build the Volkswagen cars. The company even helped build the Arbeitsdorf concentration camp near one of their main factories to ensure a steady supply of slave labor was available. In 1998, under pressure from human rights organizations, Volkswagen agreed to create a fund that would benefit the victims and their families that were used as slave labor. Other companies benefited from large profits gained by working with the Nazis in a different way. Several companies were started or acquired by wealthy individuals whose fortune started with the money made from dealing with the Nazi Party. For example, the Reimann family, who owned JAB Holdings, profited greatly from Nazi abuses and slave labor. You might be unfamiliar with JAB Holdings, but you probably know the companies they own, such as Krispy Kreme, Panera Bread, and Pret a Manger. These companies were all created post-World War II. However, their financing was partly provided by JAB Holdings, which unfortunately means they profited indirectly from the atrocities of the Nazis. When this information was made public, the Reimann family said they were planning to donate around $11 million to suitable organizations. Coca-Cola is an American company. People around the world associate Coke with being American. When you think of the soda, an image of American families or friends enjoying an ice-cold beverage probably comes to mind. However, the Coca-Cola company had ties to the Nazi Party during World War II. The drink line Fanta, which includes commercials of people happily dancing to upbeat music, was actually created for Nazi Germany. As the Nazis came to power in 1933, Coca-Cola was making enormous profits in Germany, selling their products under the leadership of Max Keith. He made the Coca-Cola brand more appealing to the German citizen, which resulted in a boost in sales. He also knew how to market the product in a way that would make people around the world want to buy Coca-Cola. During the 1936 Berlin Olympics, Max Keith made sure everyone in attendance had as much Coke as they could drink. As the Nazis prepared for war, they started to limit the amount of foreign goods coming into the country. This included Coca-Cola syrup, which began to hurt the company's profits. So the sneaky Coke executives used a third party to open a dialogue with Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command. They convinced him to allow the import of their syrup. To boost sales even further, Keith began promoting the Coca-Cola company as pro-Nazi in Germany. His plan was to reach out to the Hitler Youth and win over the younger generation of Nazis. And this worked for a time, but as war broke out, restrictions on imports became stricter again. Max Keith had a new syrup created in Germany using local products. This new soda became Fanta, based off the German word fantasy, which means imagination. In 1941, when the United States joined the war, all official contact between the Coca-Cola company and Max Keith's German branch was cut off. Keith continued to sell his supply of actual Coca-Cola syrup to the Nazi Party members and marketed the Fanta drink to the German public. The German people quickly fell in love with the drink, and Keith continued to make large profits for the Coca-Cola company. After the war ended, Coca-Cola took back control of their German branch. They even reinstated the recently convicted Nazi collaborator Max Keith as its leader. The profits made from the German branch during the years of the Nazi regime were funneled back into the main company. If you're into high-end fashion, then you might be surprised that one of the most successful fashion companies in the world has deep ties to the Nazi Party. Hugo Boss set up a fashion label in Germany 2 years before the Nazi Party came into power. Even before the Nazis gained control of the country, Hugo Boss was a Nazi collaborator. The company itself had produced early Nazi uniforms in their factories. In 1931, Hugo Boss made it clear where his allegiances lie when he officially joined the Nazi Party. He became a sponsoring member of the Schutzstaffel and made monthly donations. Hugo Boss and his company created many uniforms for the Nazis and made large profits on outfitting their soldiers. The company also produced uniforms for the SS and Hitler Youth. In order to keep up with demand, Hugo Boss had been employing slave labor from the concentration camps. It was reported that the company used 140 slaves from the camps and 40 prisoners of war from France to make their products. The worst part was that many of these workers were either worked to death or later sent to Auschwitz or Buchenwald to be sentenced to death. After the war, Hugo Boss was tried and convicted for being a supporter and beneficiary of National Socialism, and his right to own a company was taken away. The company continued under Boss's son-in-law, Eugen Holy. In 1999, the company finally agreed to pay into a fund that was set up to compensate former slave laborers. If you've ever had a headache or needed relief from pain, you may have taken an Aspirin Bayer. The company that makes the pain reliever may have one of the darkest histories when it comes to collaborating with the Nazi Party. In the 1930s, Bayer was part of a company called IG Farben. It was a conglomerate made up of several chemical companies in Germany. As the Nazis swept through Czechoslovakia, IG Farben worked closely with the party to capture chemical factories to be used by the corporation. The chemists who worked for Bayer and were employed by IG Farben later went on to create Zyklon B, the gas used in concentration camps to quickly kill large numbers of Jews and other people the Nazis labeled as undesirable. IG Farben also heavily used slave labor from the same camps they provided Zyklon B to. It was a very messed up relationship between the Nazis and IG Farben. They built a factory next to Auschwitz where they would use the prisoners their product would later kill for slave labor. As the war came to an end, IG Farben was forced to dissolve. The directors of the company were put on trial for war crimes. Unfortunately, justice was never served, and Fritz Tamir, who was the director of operations at the IG Farben facility at Auschwitz, became the president of Bayer after the war. In 1995, Bayer apologized for their role in the Holocaust. If you're watching this video, you most likely are using a device that has components built by IBM. The company, International Business Machines, has been around since 1911. In 1933, the president of the company, Thomas Watson, traveled to Germany to oversee an IBM factory being built there. At this time, IBM was using a subsidiary called the Almag to do their work in Germany. IBM's subsidiary had been hired by the Nazi Party to carry out a nationwide census. The census itself was designed to identify populations of ethnic groups that the Nazis found impure or undesirable. This included populations of Jews, Gypsies, and any ethnic group that would dilute the Aryan bloodlines of the country. IBM supplied the Nazis with punch cards and a sorting system that would make it easy for them to identify, locate, and track any people that they'd later sentence to death. These same machines and cards were later converted and used to coordinate the trains bringing people to the death camps across Nazi-controlled territories. IBM's come a long way since punch cards, but at the time the technology was bringing in massive amounts of money for the company. IBM continued to conduct business with the Germans even after the US joined the war. High-ranking members of IBM falsified data from their European subsidiaries to make sure they could smuggle in punch card materials and devices that were in high demand by the Nazis. For IBM at the time, the Nazi business of killing was highly lucrative. During World War II, Nazi Germany was IBM's largest territory after the United States. Now many computers and electronic devices use parts created by IBM. The crazy part is that up to this day, IBM has not apologized for their complicity in the Holocaust. A company's main purpose is to make money, but at what cost? It's important to never forget the past so we don't repeat the same mistakes. Collaborating with the Nazi Party and being complicit in the atrocities they carried out during World War II is a steep price to pay to make a profit. Now check out oldest companies in the world, over 800 years, or watch most powerful companies in the world. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.